Welcome to this new episode of the Orca Group. I'd like to introduce everybody. You probably recognize them from the group. There's Shavawn Boyer and there's Paul. Gosh, what's your last name, Paul, again? Paul.
Daddona.
Good.
Daddona.
Daddona. Sorry, Paul. And everyone's here. And Shona could pop in later. And so can Elena. You know Elena from all the other episodes. But this is a very special episode. This is about to celebrate the people who have sponsored to the group. And the reason why I thought this would be a really good idea is because if you were passionate enough to give your own hard-earned money into a group, there has to be a story behind you. You must be absolutely, utterly, insanely, mad about Orca as much as I am. So I'd love to get to know you, and I'd love for the group to get to know you. And I had a little bit of a chat with Paul and a little bit of a chat with Shavawn. I can tell you they're lovely people. So this episode should be a great crack, and we'll get into talking to each other and figuring out things and having a general chat about Orca, general chat about the group, and an introduction to everyone. So we'll start off with Shavawn. Shavawn, do you want to give a little introduction to yourself, what you do, and your Orca background?
All right. Well, I have been obsessed with orcas since I was little. I wanted to be an oceanographer when I was in kindergarten. My dad was heavy into photography and he had a photography business, so I helped him out with that. The only thing that kept me from being an oceanographer is that I could not swim. I took swimming lessons and still just could not learn how to swim. So that kind of gave up on my oceanographer dreams. But now that I'm older, sort of getting back into that, and I love orcas. I just, as you see from my post in the group. And I've been a nurse for about 18 years now.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. That's me.
I have mad respect for all people in the medical field, especially after what we all went through worldwide. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Paul. I have loved orcas since 1977, I think, was when the movie Orca came out. And I went to see it. And Bo Derek actually plays a marine biologist in the movie. And she started spouting off a lot of facts, quote unquote, about Orca. And I wanted to find out from that moment forward how much of what she said was true. And actually, it started a very lovely path. After seeing that movie and starting doing my own research, and in the 70s, really the only person we had to look at as to doing any kind of research was Jacques Cousteau. And a lot of misinformation came from him, a lot of good stuff. So I don't denigrate him, but there was a lot of misinformation as to behaviors because we didn't understand at the time. They weren't really researched and studied. So I have been literally studying, just grabbing anything I could find Orca since that time frame. And my mother, through her work, she was an occupational therapist. She got me backstage passes, and I know this is an anti-captivity group, and I'm fully anti-captivity. But for a 12 or 13-year-old boy to see an orca live in person in a sea aquarium in the 70s was life-altering. And so much so that my mother, through a connection at work, had a friend that was one of the trainers there. And so in that one day, I got a hug from a sea lion. I got to play with the dolphins. I got a kiss from a killer whale, and I got to shake a hand with a killer whale, and that changed everything. So, and then for jump forward, I started going on whale watching tours in Puerto Vallarta, and my friend there, Oscar Frey, does a lot with the humpback community of Bahia Banderas, and his first meeting as to why he became a marine biologist and leads the whale tours was he was up off the coast of Washington State, and a pod of orcas came up and greeted him on the shore. So that set him, and so he's kind of like a kindred brother. And then jump forward from that, I actually was able to go up to Seattle and spend some time off of Friday Harbor with the orcas in the wild, and got to see the J pod playing. It was one of those magical days where a storm started coming in, so the sea started getting rougher. We're on a really small boat that held maybe 6 people. And so we go out, we see the J pod, they're playing in the channel, and then the boat tries to go back into the port, and he couldn't make it. So he said, "Oh, well, there's something I've heard that's happening, so I want to make sure that it's there." So he took us further out into the channel, and we saw Alaskan sea lions had come down. So when they stand on their flippers, they're about 8 feet tall still. So they're swimming around the boat, and that was great. And then we started to go back into the harbor, and the boat still couldn't make it. It was still too small, and the current was getting stronger. So we ended up having to go all around San Juan Island. So there we saw a minke whale, we saw otters, we saw beavers, and all of that. And as we're coming back around into the harbor, he's on radio with the home base, and they said the J pod's on the move again. So we went back out into the channel, the sun setting, the storm's coming in, so a brilliant, beautiful sunset's coming up. And all of a sudden, he drops the hydrophone into the water, and the entire J pod, comes up as one and starts majestically swimming into the sunset. So we went back into Friday Harbor that night. We're at a local pub there, and we're drinking, and we're talking about this incredible experience the three of us just had. And the waitress swings by and she goes, "I've lived here for 25 years. That never happens." It's like, it today. So, um, and then, with the internet, I've just been following, and I'm so blessed and happy to have found your group, Nick, that I absolutely love this. I have found out more information that has helped me piece together a lot of the information that I already had. So I thank you. This is a great opportunity to learn. So thank you.
You're absolutely welcome, Paul. I love the group. I love, like, the people for me make the group, it's
Oh,
yourself,
absolutely.
Shauna, Elena, the rest of them, even the other Paul, or no, sorry, even the other Robert, who's a little like a scamp.
Yeah.
And do you want to introduce yourself, Shauna?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Yeah, everything's fine there with the
Yeah.
voice.
Sorry, I live in the Clare Valley in South Australia, and I live on a little property, so the internet is not always the greatest. So, introduce myself. I'm Shona. I've loved orcas, a little bit like yourself, Paul, since before I saw orca. Actually, I think I was in grade 5 and done a project on seals, which then led me to orcas, and I never turned back, basically. I too have had the privilege only once of seeing orca, and that was in Tofino on a little Zodiac, and thought there was no chance. I was out with the most unscrupulous tour conductor that bothered the bejeebers out of a poor little grey whale. I was so glad when we heard the call that the orcas came, because he left the grey whale alone, the horrible man. But it was the most majestic thing. I'll never forget it in my life. I literally thought, no orcas, and then out of nowhere, this huge bullfin just rose up right next to the Zodiac. I could have touched it. I didn't jump in the water. I don't know how I didn't. And yeah, it was the most majestic feeling known to mankind, and I'll never ever forget it. And my dream is hopefully next year to go to Bremer Bay over in WA, Western Australia, sorry. I'm sure many of you have heard about the canyon. That is huge on my bucket list to go and see.
Yeah, everyone here has seen orca bar me. So poor little me on this little island of Ireland. They're so rare. they're so rare here that it's almost impossible to find them. So you have to either go to Australia or Norway, or the States or Canada. So it's on my bucket list. I have to go over and see an orca at least once in my life. And I can't wait to see them. But yeah, the only closest I ever got to orca is that's behind me there. And soon enough, I have to do it. But yeah, Shona, that's a lovely story that you got to see them, and definitely.
I will make a confession, a bit like Paul. When I went to Canada, I was hell-bent on seeing orca, and I didn't want to go to an aquarium, and I swore I wouldn't go to an aquarium. And then just before I left, on our local government radio, ABC radio, they were speaking to an animal psychologist. And the animal psychologist was certainly against animals in captivity. But she did say, if there's one thing you can do, it is to send positive vibes. And that sounds really hippie. I know it. But I did actually go to the Vancouver Aquarium. I didn't actually watch a show, but I did go below to the actual where you can look through the big. And I just spent half an hour pretty much in tears. But just, yeah, it was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever done in my life.
Do you know what? There's many stories on the group about people going to these marine parks, and the thing is, I think everybody can relate to that idea of going to them before anything like Blackfish, or even the idea of Free Willy came out. We just didn't know what the story was with marine parks.
Well, exactly. We didn't know the story. My hope really right now, with science moving at the rapid pace that it is, and I know we all have tried to like put orca into an AI thing, and the results are hysterical. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping with artificial intelligence that it gets to the point that a group of kids can actually put on the VR headsets and say they're studying marine life, and they can study anything from an octopus to an orca to a sperm whale to blue whales. I mean, I had the fortunate opportunity when I was growing up in my formative years, my childhood to teen years. I was in Washington, D.C., so I had the Smithsonian there. And when you're a little kid again, and you walk into the hall and there's the blue whale, and it's 65, 75 feet long or whatever it is, and you walk from one side of the room to the other, and then you look back and you're looking up at the skeleton. Those kinds of things are also life altering, just as much as, yes, the pay for enjoyment thing like that, I'm hoping is coming to a close. With the virtual reality moving, I'm hoping that classrooms can, instead of taking a field trip, can take a world trip and spend an hour just researching one or two certain things and seeing how different behaviors happen. I'm very intrigued with the drone footage that I'm seeing, and with the robotic dolphin that we showed here on the group. And these are all things that are moving forward. I think give us a great benefit of bringing us back to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, I think the best one there is going to be the animatronics in terms of marine parks, because it'll be cheaper for them to do that. Like, and they can get it so realistic, like that dolphin that was shown. Yeah, so like, why wouldn't they do that? Like, I mean, if it's almost realistic to the point where you can't tell the difference between a real one and not. And Hayne Stragner, that was in the first episode, she said orca that are in parks aren't killer. They're not orcas in the sense of the word, that they're psychologically damaged to the point where their behaviors are so artificial in terms of the animal themselves that people go to see the actual just physical representation of doing tricks, like I don't know what to say, but it'd be nearly better for them to invent an animatronic to do that thing than having a live specimen in the cramped conditions, you know.
Yeah, because I've unfortunately had one of those stories when I was 6 or 7 years old. My parents did take me to SeaWorld in Florida. And, now that I'm looking back on that experience, I would never do that again. But that actually helped me fall in love with orca more. So now that I'm grown, I do whale watching a lot. When I was living in LA, I went whale watching so much that they started giving me a discount because I would go so much. And the reason that I gave the captain my number, because one day I was sitting at home, I was off, and orcas came through Newport Beach. I think it was back in 2018. And he told me that all 3 trips that day got to see the killer whales. And I was like, why didn't you call me? I was sitting at home. I could have been there in 30 minutes and I would have been there all day. And so that kind of helped me get my first orca adventure. In 2018, I went to Monterey Bay and they were hunting, and they had actually the day before killed a baby gray whale. So the carcass was actually underneath the water. We couldn't see it, but there was like blubber coming up to the top, and we could see that. And one of the pieces of the blubber actually came up where I was on the boat. And as I'm reaching to get my camera, because I'm like, I'm going to record this, the killer whale comes up, eats it, and I get sprayed with its breath. So that was like one of my first like real life orca adventures. So yeah, unfortunately, everybody does kind of have a story of, when they're before Blackfish came out, of them going to, aquarium or SeaWorld or something like that. And unfortunately, yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but there were like one of the things those marine parks did well was propaganda. You know, I've heard people say their kids came home and they says, "Hey, ma'am, I helped save the whales." Like, so they're
Yeah.
going in there, they're going in there and saying we're protecting them from going extinct. And if you're just exposed to that message, you're going to believe it, and that's what it is. You're going to feel good about yourself leaving the place.
Well,
But
it's the same thing with the global thing on recycling. I'm sorry, that's the biggest scam on the planet. So
yeah, there was some news about that, about China refusing the world's rubbish, and then all the infrastructure wasn't built around the world or something. But I want to ask Shona or Shavawn, sorry, what did the orca's breath smell like?
Very fishy. And what actually surprised me too is like they say if you're pregnant, like if a woman's pregnant, that she shouldn't go whale watching, because something in the breath of the whales can get into your system. Because I know when I went to Monterey Bay, they did ask if the women were pregnant, and I was like, So I need to actually research that to see exactly what is in the breath, because I never knew that.
Has to be a bacteria, but
I
yeah,
think so. Yeah, but that was
or
like the
mercury.
moment of my life.
No, that sounds great.
that sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, you're just like, wow, this big mouth coming up at you, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So another member, Robert, we all know Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I actually love. I love. I'm like, oh no, but yeah, at the same time,
Yeah.
with Robert. But he's in the Whale Museum in Australia at the moment. And he did a little clip there. He had posted there earlier on this morning. Shauna, so that's in Australia. You could go there as well, actually, and it looks amazing. Has old Tom there, and
Yeah.
there was this little piece of information on the right before his skeleton, and it said that he's not 90 years old, but he's only 35. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all know about old Tom and the orcas there, but he was a member of a pod that helps the whalers of that area in New South Wales, I think it was.
Yeah, in a, sorry, in a place called Eden, right
Eden,
down
yeah.
New South Wales, Victoria. Yeah, my son actually lives in Canberra, so I'm actually hoping to go in September. There was actually a orca sighting in a place called Merimbula just in the last 3 days. That's quite close to Eden. And just watching Facebook, a few different sites, there's been a few newer, not newer, there's been a lot more whale sightings down there, and they haven't been seen for many, many years. One would suggest they've always been there. We just don't always
See them, yeah. The whales that interacted with old Tom and his pod. So the story goes is that the orca would go down into the water and force the I think it was pilot whales, I'm not sure, but they used to force the whales up into the surface, and then they would get harpooned by the whalers, and the orcas benefit from doing that would they get the liver and the tongue. But one day, a sailor went along and was refused to give the orca, who was old Tom, the liver and the tongue, and tried to take home the whale, strap it to the side of the boat. And old Tom kind of had a fight with him. So he pulled on the rope that was in at the orca's mouth, and he broke the teeth of the orca. And that's a death sentence for an orca.
Right.
Yeah. So what happened was he knew that the guy that did that to old Tom knew that was pretty much going to backfire on all of the pod that goes against the whales. And that's what happened. And shortly after that, whaling was outlawed or banned in New South Wales, and that pod disappeared, just like Shona said, that they haven't been seen in that area until now, I guess. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. That was one of the first documentaries that I saw, The Killers in Eden.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of when I was in the 70s and everything. That's part of how I found out that the killer whale name came into existence, was because the orcas were helping whalers, and they would do their hunting behaviors, and they would guide the other whales to the whaling ships. And the whalers started calling them Judas whales because they were betraying the other whales. And then that became whale killer and then killer whale. That's part of the mythology that I had heard and started operating under, actually, was that orcas actively helped the whaling ships in the 1800s.
Yeah, and you can imagine, like, because it was seen in New South Wales, it's definitely happened somewhere else along the line, yeah. And you know, even their actual scientific name, which is Honoris Orca or Orcanis Orca. I never actually said it out loud before, I only read it.
Yeah.
That means guide or something to the dead, guiders to the dead or something or like that. But it's really ominous anyway.
So there's many translations. It was Pliny the Elder, that actually gave them the name for Latin. Orcanus is oblong-shaped vessel, and Orca is one of the guardians of hell, a demon of hell, or there's many translations thereof. That's why people are like, well, I don't know if a behemoth of hell shaped like a vessel is a good name for him either.
Yeah, they're fascinating animals, apex predators, and do you know what? If I'd be afraid of them too if I was on their dinner menu. Do you know, like you just have no chance with them. But somehow, for some reason, they don't mind our humans, and because of that, we just love them. You know?
Yeah.
Well, and see, I think that goes back to that there was a symbiotic relationship between us, back in the whaling days when the whalers relied on them and they relied on the whalers because the whalers would give them the things that wouldn't sell, the livers and things like that. So, and the cheekbone or the cheeks. So I think that is a history that they developed among themselves. And my really feeling is that the more that we start to understand our own brains, I don't even think we can even start to attempt to try to figure out anybody else's brains. I the I, as I said to you, Nick, I'm studying medical coding. One of my books is 1,500 pages, and that's every list of every diagnosable disease, ailment, death reason, or anything that you can actually have is coded down into a 4-code, 7-code number. Um, that's 1,400 pages. It's like if we start looking at other animals and other beings on this planet and stop looking at um, this whole thing that we are the apex person on this planet. We are not by far. And nature has proven to us over again that if we need to ever look anywhere else that something is stronger than us, just look at nature itself. Nature will create whatever hardship it needs to create to make a point.
Yeah,
And
we're certainly not the most intelligent creatures on the planet. That's for sure.
well, we're still in our infancy. We're still trying to figure it out. And where we have, this is why I think the Buddhists have a little leg up, is because there's the thing and there's the name for the thing, and that's one thing too many. So if a whale's out, I mean, it was really great in Puerto Vallarta in January. I got to watch baby humpbacks, and they were, starting to learn the behavior of breaching and everything else. And so this little baby would go out, and then with all her might, she'd like break the surface and then do a belly flop right back into the water, and then she'd do it again, and the joy that she was just expressing. I see breaching is celebratory. It's just a way that they're having fun. But again, we're now ascribing names that we use for our own behaviors to other things, and I don't think it really translates.
Well, that's all reference we can go past. Like, we struggle to identify with other creatures. We struggle to identify with different cultures on the planet. We're not great at it. Like, and there is some kind of hope on the horizon, though, Paul, because I've heard of this guy now. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but there's this guy in Sweden, a scientist, and he's working with AI and Orca recordings, sounds, and he believes he's going to be able to crack the code with their language to us to be able to talk with them using AI. And I'm going to track him down and see if we get him onto the podcast. But that would be amazing. We can actually directly talk to these. That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I would love to be able to, communicate with an orca. Like, let me my dream.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We have the one-way communication, which is we listen to them with the the aquaphones. I think that's what they're called. But what if, like, it'd be an easy thing to do if we could just go along two-way communication underneath the water. We could ask them, hey, what's the story going on in the Iberian Strait? Why are you guys taking off the rudders? What's it about the rudders that you like? Here's a fish, maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's a toll going to be happening. I don't know. Who knows? But we'll be able to talk to them, which would be amazing. Yeah. If we can figure out protein folding with AI, we can figure out their language.
Right.
So Shona, you're saying about going over to this area in Australia. Can you give us a little bit more information about that area?
Yeah, it's called Bremer Bay. It's down the lower part of the west of Australia. And I think they've been whale watching there for about 10 years now in the canyon. I don't know what the depth is. I think Shavawn's been doing a bit of research. I've seen You posted a
Yeah.
few things about them. They're called naturalist tours.
Mhm.
So between, I think, about February to March, April, May, they're fairly regular sightings. The last 2 years, they've actually, whilst they've been out on tours, I'm going to say the privilege, I don't want to upset anyone, of seeing them take out whales, actually predation whilst on tour. They also see like the colossal squids as well as great big sunfish and all sorts of pelagic birds as well, given the place. But Shavawn would say, I think you're keen to get over there as well. It is very, very, very regular whale watching. There was hardly a day missed this season where there wasn't orca and multiple pods of orcas. I think there's 2 or 3 pods.
What do they predate on over there? Is it seals? Is it a stingray like in New Zealand?
Whales.
Or did they get whales? Okay.
Whales. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
right
really
before the
They took a great whale this year, I think it was.
Yeah, right before the pandemic hit, I was actually supposed to go over to Bremer Bay. I had was gonna fly into Perth and then literally whale watch for a whole week, but unfortunately the pandemic hit and so I wasn't able to get there. But yeah, it's definitely in the winter time in Bremer Bay. That's like they see them almost every day. And yeah,
wow.
it's whales, and I think some sperm whales go there too to eat the squids. But
It's
yeah.
almost like it sounds like Puget Sound where you can just see them mostly every day, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And a bit like Shavawn, I'm a bit cheeky when I made some investigations. It was like, actually, I don't want to go out for a day. Are there any research vessels heading out? There wasn't at the time. But if I go out for a week, and they too were quite keen to look at discounts for people that wanted to go out.
It's an expensive hobby, isn't it? Going out to these whale watching. It's an expensive hobby. Talking to Roisin, I said, "Hey, Roisin, do you know the next time we're out, can I just hop into the corner of that research vessel and let me just let me tag along? I won't. You won't even know I'm there." But yeah, I don't think she's going to call me. She said she will, but she won't. No, I don't believe her.
No. Yeah,
You
it
could be
is expensive,
surprised.
but what I did when I was living in LA is I would take the Amtrak train from LA up to Seattle, and then I would take the seaplane from Seattle to the San Juan Islands. And it's expensive. It is. But yeah, I saved my money and I was like, I'm going to see some orca up here. So I had 4 days off from work. And the first 2 days, I only saw some humpback whales. And the third day, I was going to go home because I wanted at least a day to rest before I went back to the hospital to work. And I was like, no, I have one more day that I can, whale watch. So I did. I extended my vacation, and the third day is when I saw the orca up in Seattle. So I was like, yay, I could get to see them. So so it is expensive. You just kind of gotta save your money. And like when I was a travel nurse, I traveled to the area of where the orca were going to be. So April and May in Monterey Bay, I tried to take a job there, and then I tried to get around LA because that's it's less expensive to fly out of LA. So that's how I got to go to Australia that one time. I didn't see any whales that time, but that, yeah, just save your money and you can, whale watch. It's my hobby.
Who needs a yeah? Who needs a house or a car or any of those things?
Yeah.
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 um, so, guys, I want to ask you all a question. The most kind of controversial thing that has been introduced into the group has been those titles and warnings going on and the hunting videos. And me personally, I kind of like but at the same time, it's been used in schools and it's been used to teach kids. And I'm like, well, what's the most responsible thing to do? It's probably give them a fair choice to just, either skip past it with that symbol or look at it and teach their kids, what their nature is. But what do you guys, how do you feel about that?
I'm actually okay with it. One of the first things, again, going back into the 70s, I looked at was a National Geographic, and it was pure predation description and pictures of orcas separating a mama and a baby gray whale, and they flayed the baby within 90 seconds. Literally ripped skin off of the whale and everything else. Graphically shown in pictures, but again, I was 14, 15 at the time when that came out. So I was okay with seeing that. By that time, I was watching slasher movies. So but when it's used for younger kids, especially in like grade school, elementary school, definitely I think they need to be alerted to it, because yes, they are very cute, and the other misnomer name that I really cannot stand is sea pandas. they but I don't want to break a little kid's awe and wonder when they see something vicious happening. If they want to learn more, and they can, then they can understand why the misnomer names and everything else of killer whales and things like that. That's up to them. But otherwise, just see them as an intelligent being, and I think that's perfectly fine to use the warnings.
What do you think,
Yeah,
Shavawn?
I go back and forth some days because I understand the kids. Yeah, they don't need to see all of that hunting. But also on the other hand, it's like this is how, what they do in the wild. This is who killer whales are. And I remember coming home one day and there was a hawk right in our yard eating a field mouse, and the mouse's head was on the floor. I mean, I couldn't, not see it. It was right there in my backyard. So things like that, it just became a teaching moment. My mom was like, "This is how the hawk eats. If the hawk doesn't eat, the hawk dies." And so I kind of put that to the orcas. Like if the orcas don't eat, then they're going to die. So, and if we want to save the orca and make their population rise, then that also means that some animals are going to die. And so
Right.
I go back and forth. Some days I'm like, okay, yes, trigger warning, it's for the kids. And then some days I'm like, this is nature. I don't want to, not show all of the orca behaviors, because when you go out to whale watching, you might not get a warning. They might just be, eating something or
Having
killing
lunch.
something.
Yeah.
So I go back and forth.
What do
I
you think,
agree.
Shona?
I completely agree. I have no issue with it whatsoever. It's a natural part of life, and we see it on all the animal lives, all the shows. Kids can seek this information way easier than we ever could in one place if they want to see non-stop animals eating animals. I don't have a problem. It was interesting just this year when in Bremer Bay there was a whale taken out. There was a lot of conversation around that with the crew and with the people. There were a lot of people that were quite emotional by seeing that. It wasn't something they had expected to see on a whale tour, which is an interesting construct in itself. What do you expect to see on a whale tour? Just them bit of tail slapping and spy hopping? Or so I don't have a problem with it. I think I said in my first bit that I would actually be keen to see that happen in real life. It's a natural part of the process.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's true, because I remember when I was growing up, we watched Mutual of Omaha Wild Kingdom with, and the opening scene showed a cheetah eating, flesh off of a bone. It's like that's how he's eating. Okay.
Yeah. Here's some of the against arguments. One person sent me a very let's say colorful message and said, why are kids allowed on Facebook in the first place? It's not a platform for kids. And I was like, well, you know what, there was a rule at one point where kids weren't allowed on Facebook, and I didn't actually develop the Orca group in the first place thinking about kids, but now here we are with kids, and we have to, like, it's a compromise, a little symbol at the start. Yeah, it's going to annoy a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's just a symbol. It's not going to bother you. I don't censor anything in terms of not posting stuff because it has predation on it, but it's just that symbol, you know.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not really essentially saying, you know, removing all of the hunting videos. It just has that bleeding symbol on it, but it still annoys me. I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed as well seeing it, but I can imagine with Shavawn, with the sheer amount of stuff that you have, that symbol is probably coming up in in your predictive text suggestions a lot.
Yes, it really is. And
Yeah.
sometimes I forget, and then I'm like, wait a minute, let me go back and put the warning.
Oh no.
So I do forget. So I do forget sometimes, but then I'm like, okay, let me put this up, just so the kids won't see it.
Here's the thing, I think, Siobhan, if there's blood in it, right? If there's graphic material, you can use the code or the symbol. But if it doesn't, if they're just hunting something and there's nothing really being shown, just don't bother. I think it was the video where they caught the seal pup and they split it in half. I think that was the big one, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that was the real big one. That was the one that a lot of people came to me and said, "Hey, hang on, come on now." But yeah.
I thought it would have been the other one, because I posted another one where they were hunting the whale, and there was a lot of blood in the water. I would have thought that one would be the one that they censored. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that one, but that was the big one. I think it was in Mexico, and it was a humpback whale that wasn't even dead yet. Yeah, I think that was the one that I would have said
There was another one with the actual blue whale, and the people following the blue whale getting hunted on said it was just absolutely brutal. They were watching these orca smash into him and pulling off skin, and it was going on for 4 hours or 6 hours or something. And they'd all go away and take turns coming back. And you can imagine, Jesus Christ, if I was that blue whale, just finished me already. I know.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of it. Like you said, it's their nature.
I mean, for me, that National Geographic that I read, they described the hunting, the predation, the behavior to the point of precision. Like, one whale came in and sat on top of the blowhole of the baby and forcing it down, and then two rammed the cheeks of the humpback, forcing its mouth open. A fourth whale then goes in and drags the tongue out, which then the whale's going to die because he can't breathe and take the water out of its mouth. So his lungs would just fill with water and everything. But it was that then it's like, oh my God, now I want to know more. I want to learn more how this behavior is coming about. It's like, so, but I leave it up to the person. If they want to learn it, then it's there to be seen. So.
Like it's precision hunting, like, and
exactly,
and they figured out stuff that you wonder how the heck they figured it out, like what's the name of it, paralysis toximosis, I think. Paralysis.
Was it toxic immobility, tonic immobility? Yes.
That's
from the documentary, The Whale That Ate Jaws, goes into that in detail. And that's one of the ones I love.
So we're actually having a shark specialist on the next episode. And he is from the South African whales going down there, or the South African orca attacking port and starboard, attacking the white whales down there, or the white sharks down there, and so that should be interesting. He's actually working in Norway at the moment, but he's a shark specialist, and he'll be talking about the orca down there in South Africa.
I can't wait for that one.
Yeah, that's going to be cool.
That's a good one.
It's great that I'm getting to talk to all these specialists around the world and people like you. Who would have thought that I could talk to two people in America and one in Australia today? Like, it's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So, I had an actual question there, and it's just after being thrown out of my mind. But so let's see. Gosh, I'm actually
I'll do a
going
gap
blank.
filler. I live in South Australia, and we have a lot of great white sharks around our coastline in South Australia. We don't have resident orca, but probably about 5-6 years ago, in a place called Port Lincoln, they do shark cave diving. And I think it was about 5-6 years ago, it'll be on the internet, there actually was some orcas that came through. They didn't actually attack the great whites, but the shake cage business basically had to shut down for nearly the next 2 years. The great whites just did not come back to that area for a significant length of time. I haven't researched it, but it was very impactful, and they spoke about the fear that the great whites have of the orcas so much that they would leave.
Wow.
Yeah, you're right. And they wouldn't come back to that area at least for something like 10 or 30 years or something like that. Some mad amount of time. Is that right? Am I reading the same one as yours?
That's the big fear of what's going on with port and starboard, is the sharks are necessary in that ecosystem as well. And the sharks are disappearing. So that is a very big concern, because I was watching something else. I can't remember where, but they used Pacific Northwest orca songs in an area where a different resident population was, and they weren't bothered by it. But as soon as they put the recordings of the local orca pod in the water, everything scattered. And because whether they could hear it, or I don't know how fish sense, because they don't have ears, so I don't know how they sense all those things. But like the waters go quiet as soon as they drop the recordings in the water and start playing it. So
there was a documentary.
It was something I watched just recently.
Yeah, there was something with Ingrid Fisher. I think it was on the Discovery Channel. I was watching about that. They were
that was it.
Yes, I forgot the name of it, but I do remember seeing it. And yeah, once they played the orca song, the sharks laughed. So yeah, that is. I'll look into that. It was about a week ago. I saw that.
It was on Discovery Channel. You're right. Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen that recent video about the guy who got attacked by tiger sharks. Tiger shark. He got ate. It was on video. But he died. I think it was someplace. Gosh, where I can't remember where the place was. But yeah, so the two of them, the dad and the son, moved to this place to avoid all the COVID lockdown rules and regulations. And it was a known place for tiger sharks, and people were told to get out of the water and not go into it. But this guy, he went into the water, and he was straight away attacked by a tiger shark and ate. Lots of people think great whites are the biggest, risk because of jaws, but it's tiger shark. Tiger sharks are the kind of one to look out for. What they did to that tiger shark afterwards was they dragged them onto the beach and killed them. And who's the right person there? What's the right and wrong answer there? Talking about more the you just I don't know. If I was in that situation, I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah.
why don't they, like, if this is happening with all type of sharks, if all sharks leave the area when they hear orca, why don't people like surfers or something just carry around a little kind of like audio device and strap it onto them?
The orca.
And you don't have to worry about it. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
Pretend to be orcas.
yeah, I mean, that might, deter the sharks, you never know.
There was something I remember years ago that there's this electrical signal that they could put into the water and sharks use electrical magnetic frequencies to detect fish underneath the water, and this disturbs them so much that they just get out of there. But that's another way to turn for sharks. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off the point. So the other question was, what do you think is going on in the Iberian Strait with the rudders?
I think they're having fun. I really do just associate it to teenage whales just being teenagers. And when you take a rudder off a boat, it cuts the resistance in the water, so you can basically pass it along and play with it a little bit easier. So if you take the rudder off of a boat, it's going to be easier to skim across the water.
Yeah. And then also they can, I do think it's play too. And one video that I saw, it kind of looked like they were using the rudder to scratch themselves. So I was like, maybe it's just, I know they've had parasites on their skin. So maybe that's one of the ways that they can get the parasites off. I don't know if that's, been theorized with the scientists or something, but that kind of looked like they were just playing with it and scratching themselves. So, you never know.
I mean, Shavawn, you've shown so many videos of orca interacting with boats that if an orca really wanted to take out one of these yachts, it would take no time whatsoever. They have they don't care about it. I think it's a passing phase that I think it's just, somebody's having fun. I don't associate it all going back to like Gladys. I really don't. Because that again is overlaying the way that a human aggression would, take aggressive stance on something that felt attacked. Orca are very precise in what they want and how they get it, and they have no desire to sink these boats. So the misleading information of all these attacks on the Iberian Peninsula and everything, it's like they're not attacks. They're as curious about us as we are of them. They're just, in my opinion, a lot smarter than we are. So
when you hear some of the reports, they have scouts. So the Orca group, they assume it's around 16. They send out scouts to find these particular boats, these yachts. As soon as they spot them, they'll go back into the main pod and they'll say, "Hey lads, here's one of them boats. Come on." And they'll come on, they'll go after it. Their main objective is actually disabling the boat, not to actually destroy the boat. So they'll pull off the rudder. They know it stops the boat in their tracks.
Right.
A few cases where the boat sank was because the rudder was securely, like very strongly attached to the back of the boat. So when they were ripping it off, it actually put holes where the bolts put into in the back of the boat, and they were actually pulling out the bolts, which caused the leaks. They weren't actually trying to smash the hull or anything. So this is very strategic behavior. I don't know if it's play, Paul, because it's planned. They're doing it like this is, they're sending out scouts, finding the vessels, disabling the vessels, and then leaving. They're playing.
So yes, so they're a bunch of teenage boys, and one comes out and says, "Oh look, there's one of them boats." Pods always have. They've got front scouts and back scouts. So as the pod is moving, you'll always have two or three up in the front, and and if something happens to them, they're there to warn the pod that's coming up behind, and the ones that come up, the scouts that are coming up at the last, are the ones that are there to, like, if anything is attacking the pod, they're going to be the ones that actually secure it. So that they are very precise in their thing, yes, but I think somebody was mentioning the other day on the group, I'm pretty sure, why is it that, in the Pacific Northwest, one of the orcas decided to put a dead salmon on his head and swim around with it for a while, and that caught on as a fad. I think it is a fad, but I think also it's going to become more and more of an issue the more that the Saving the Whales campaigns have actually worked, and that humpbacks, their numbers are way above what they were when whaling was out. Nobody wants to talk about those things because then there would be a whale push to kill the whales again in certain countries. So nobody wants to talk about the fact that the endangered whales are coming back. And there is going to be more interactions between whales and humans because of that, because we're invading the oceans more and more. I mean, what we're doing in the seaboard of the eastern United States, putting propellers above the water to number one, it just increases the salination in the water. There's so much science to this that I can't believe people do it. But then I couldn't believe that the Navy was using sonic resonances to try to scare the pods away. Anything that interferes with the whale's ability to communicate, they're going to figure out a way around it. And I think part of that is also what's happening with these boats. Is there something on the bottom of the ship that is interfering with their communication standards?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's play, but I definitely think that they find these boats, but in particular, a nuisance, and they're just that's what they're doing with them. They're like, because like the lads from Orca Librica, they said that these boats are illegal fishing and using large hooks that they're finding in the backs of Orca, and
Yes.
the reason why they said about White Gladys is because she's got an impact wound in her side from a boat, the hull of a boat. So I'd say between those two things, and one was responsible for the death of a calf, I think. So I think what they're doing was they've identified that this boat in particular is a nuisance to their pod, their way of life, or reducing their way of life or quality of life, and they're taking them out of action. That's my theory anyway. But yeah, what you're saying about the sonic resonance, I think it's either Portugal or Spain recently has said that that's what they're going to do to dissuade
which is the worst thing they can do.
Worst thing they can do, because that could actually cause strandings.
Yes, and that's what happened with the Navy off the coast of California. Was a bunch of whales were beaching themselves and they couldn't figure out why, and it was because the United States Naval Research was using some sonic resonance along the coastlines when they were trying to build a pipeline, actually, I think is what it was. And so they were trying to scare off the wildlife, and so that we as human beings could make ourselves ever more important. And it caused a massive beaching. And then that all of a sudden it was in the late 60s, and then in the early 70s they stopped that research and they stopped doing that. So that I'm surprised that the Portuguese fishermen would think that this is a way to go when it has been proven not. But
it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because you're going to hear an awful lot about Shavawn is gone. You're going to hear an awful lot about that problem in Canada in the very near future, because they planned to put a pipeline through there, and the scientists all would say that's going to kill the residents.
Yes.
So you're going to hear an awful lot about that in the very near future. One of the other things is, we'll see if we can wait until Shavawn comes back, but we've now reached the hour mark. And hello, Shavawn.
I'm back.
So we've actually, I was just saying that the rest of the group there, that we've come to the end of this episode. It was a pleasure talking to you guys, and thank you very much for sponsoring the group. It allows this program, the subscription at Zoom and the other programs I use to make the episodes. And I'm very grateful, and thank you very much for contributing to it. It means the world to me that somebody would actually, spend their hard-earned money, and gosh, we all know how hard it is to come by that. So thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You are more than welcome, and what you've done since I've donated a tiny little amount is amazing. The interviews have been fantastic. Thank you.
Every single last cent means the world to me, because it allows me to make the group better, and having you guys in it is amazing. I would have never imagined it would have got this big when I started the group. But yeah, it means the world to me, and thanks very much. I hope you know how grateful I am. Thanks very much, everyone, for being part of this special episode, and it was an absolute pleasure meeting you all, and hopefully we'll do another one in the very near future. We'll get Shauna's timing better, so that she's not up early in the morning like this. But anyway, thanks very much, guys, and have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Everyone.
Bye.